The shriek of a cub tore through the reinforced corridors of Threxel Station Kindergarten Unit 17. It was 0700 local rotation, and the teaching staff was already suiting up like soldiers heading into a firefight. Veteran instructor Krell's triple-segmented torso twisted as she strapped on her chest plate. The plating had 4 deep claw marks from yesterday's gentle arts circle. Her helmet hissed as it sealed, internal air filtering through a backup purifier, mandatory since the incident involving the glitter paste bombs. "Never let your shield drop," Krell growled, voice crackling through the comlink. "Not even for eye contact. You'll lose a limb before snack time." The new hires nodded, their armored boots shifting uneasily on the scorched floor. One of them, a fresh recruit named Silt, was still trying to attach his plasma-proof gauntlet with trembling claws. The door to classroom Gamma thudded once. Something slammed it from the other side. Then again, harder. Screams echoed within. The reinforced viewport showed at least 3 cubs scaling the book tower, launching themselves onto the foam walls with terrifying agility. They were adorable, of course. Big black eyes, fluff like newborn mammoth rats, and voices like squeaky toy anvils. But underneath all that softness lay a storm of predatory instinct. Teeth like laser-cut obsidian, and a survival rate for unarmored instructors measured in seconds. Krell reached for her concussion baton. Form a triangle, wedge in, suppress the dominant alpha first. The outer corridor door slid open with a hiss. They all turned. A man strolled in, yawning, scratching his head with one hand, holding a thermos with the other. No armor, no helmet, no shielding. Just soft flannel pajamas with a faded cartoon spaceship on the front and slippers that squeaked faintly with every step. One had a crescent moon on the toe. The other bore a smiling star. "Morning," he said. "Is this the place?" A dozen weapons locked on him instantly. "You stop," barked Krell. "You cannot enter the classroom. You are unshielded, unlicensed, and clearly suicidal." "I'm Daniel," the man said, pausing to sip from his thermos. "The exchange teacher. I got the form stamped at Central Hall. Section 42B. Krell's throat went dry. "You're the human?" "That's me," Daniel said, swaying slightly. "Sorry I'm a bit late. Jet lag. Didn't know Threxel rotated every 17 hours. Your armor, where is your armor?" Daniel looked down at himself, mildly puzzled. "Oh, yeah. I don't wear any for early childhood work. It makes the kids anxious." He moved toward the door. Silt lunged forward to block him. "Sir, if you step into that room, you will be flayed alive before you can blink." Daniel gave him a polite nod and sidestepped. "Appreciate the concern, really, but I've handled kids before." The classroom door opened. Every guard flinched. They expected a pounce, a shriek, at minimum, a flash of claws. What they heard was sniffing. The cubs had gone still, all 9 of them. They stood in a loose circle, twitching noses in Daniel's direction. One, the class alpha, a female named Garina, growled low in her throat. Daniel knelt. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm your new friend." He unscrewed his thermos cap and set it down beside him. A warm, chocolatey smell wafted through the room. From his pajama pocket, he pulled out a book. A real one paper, slightly frayed at the corners. The cover showed an illustrated child riding a giant yellow dog through the stars. The cubs edged closer. "You want a story?" Daniel asked. "It's a good one, bit long though." Garina snarled again. He opened the book and began reading. No translator, no amplification, just a calm, even tone. And Max, the boy, wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind. The growling paused. One cub crept forward and sniffed Daniel's slipper. Another circled behind and poked his shoulder, claws withdrawn. Garina sat back on her haunches. Daniel turned the page. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. A cub climbed into his lap. Another pressed into his side. 5 minutes later, Daniel was buried in a living pile of drowsy furballs. One snored against his shoulder, another gnawed absently on his sleeve, then gave a sleepy purr and stopped. Outside the observation window, the armored teachers stared, weapons slack at their sides. What is he made of?" whispered Silt. "Is he emitting a sedative?" asked another. "He must be a lure," Krell muttered. "A trap no one bonds that fast with cubs unless they've been chemically scented." Then, one cub, from deep within the pile, sneezed. Daniel murmured something in response. The entire heap of cubs shifted but didn't stir. He turned another page, completely calm, voice quiet and low. The rest of the class passed in silence. No emergency extractions, no scorch marks, no torn armor. After nap cycle ended, Daniel emerged with his hair slightly tousled, shirt stained with what might have been grape paste, and one arm bandaged neatly at the forearm. He moved carefully, favoring that side. "They got you?" Krell asked, half triumphant, half relieved. "One of the younger ones," he admitted, sitting gingerly. "Didn't mean to. Got startled when I turned the page too fast. Little nip, not deep. Cleaned and disinfected it right away." He flexed the hand slowly, testing movement. No tendon damage. Probably bruising under the puncture, though. I'll ice it after snack cycle. "You stayed in there," said Silt, after being bitten. "Well, yeah." Daniel shrugged. "You don't bail on a toddler story just because someone gets a little overenthusiastic. You didn't retaliate, or signal for help." "Should I have?" Daniel took another sip from his thermos. "I mean, what would that teach them?" The aliens stared. A few sat down, clanking in their gear. Daniel smiled faintly. "You think this is wild? You ever seen a sugar crash in a room full of 6-year-olds after Halloween?" No one replied. "I've had one kid glue another kid's shoes to the ceiling. Another tried to eat a hamster. This?" He gestured toward the cubs, now snoozing peacefully in a pile behind the glass. "This is just another Tuesday." Krell leaned in, voice hushed. "You're not immune to them?" Daniel pulled back his sleeve, showing an old, curved scar near the elbow. "Got this from a Labrador retriever when I was 5. Thought it was hugging me. I thought the same thing." He laughed quietly. "We just learned to read the chaos. You give it calm, you get calm back. Eventually." The battle-suited staff stared at his pajama-clad figure, his bandaged arm, the scent of cocoa still lingering in the air. Outside, the cubs stirred. One opened a sleepy eye, spotted Daniel through the glass, and bared its tiny teeth. It was meant to be a threat. But it looked suspiciously like a smile. The next rotation began with an emergency strategy meeting. Instructor Krell tapped the display screen with the edge of her gauntlet. Footage of Daniel from the previous day, looped in silence, the human cross, legged, book open, with Grina sprawled across his lap like a sunbathing predator. "We've reviewed the footage 10 times, she said, ignoring the low muttering. "He does not emit tranquilizing pheromones, no auditory subfrequency manipulation, no neural disruption pulses. The human Daniel is just a human." Silt raised a trembling claw. "But he was bitten, Krell. Any one of us would have lost a limb from that angle. The jaw force of a Threxel cub is—" "Yes, we know," Krell snapped. "They are weapons with whiskers." Another instructor leaned forward. "And he still went back in there this morning. Same pajamas, slightly cleaner." The staff monitor flickered to a new feed. Daniel, crouched beside 2 cubs who were tugging a foam mat in opposite directions. He spoke quietly. One growled, the other bared teeth. Daniel poured a tiny splash of cocoa into a plastic training cup and placed it on the ground. Both cubs paused. The tug-of-war turned into sniffing, then cautious sipping. Moments later, they were curled side by side beneath a climbing net, sharing a crayon. What is that drink?" asked Silt, voice hushed with the awe of someone witnessing alchemy. "Cocoa," Krell said. "We scanned it. Non-toxic, low-stimulant content contains sugar." Gasps rippled through the staff room. "He's drugging them!" cried one instructor, clearly relieved to have found the answer. "Then why are they less hyper?" Krell said. "I've tasted it. It's just warm, sugar, milk, with flavor." The room fell silent again. Daniel's second day ended with fewer bite marks, but a cracked toenail, courtesy of an accidental stomp from a cub leaping off a jungle gym. He soaked the foot in cool water in the infirmary, while 2 medical bots hovered nearby, chirping diagnostic data. "No fracture," one confirmed. "Nail will discolor and fall off in 7 to 10 Earth days. Healing estimated within 3 weeks." Daniel nodded and rubbed his temples. "Good." Was worried it split. Krell stood just inside the doorway, watching. Her armor was unscathed today. She hadn't stepped into the classroom once. "You didn't signal for assistance." Daniel looked up. "Didn't need to, he didn't mean it, just too excited." You are aware these cubs regularly incapacitate instructors in fully reinforced suits. I noticed. He paused. But I'm not trying to overpower them. I just stay low. Stay warm. Let them burn off the storm. Why pajamas? She blurted. Daniel blinked. What? The pajamas, Krell said. They are utterly defenseless. Why not wear at least fabric armor? Daniel smiled. Because they're familiar. Soft things lower defenses. Human kids have the same reaction. Pajamas mean safety, sleep, warmth. He tilted his thermos toward her. You all walk in looking like a mech squad. If I were 2 feet tall and full of teeth, I'd fight too. Krell stared. She didn't argue. Day 3 began with screaming. Krell was already in her armor when she heard the high-pitched howls echo through the corridor. Classroom Gamma's emergency lights were strobing red. The door was sealed. Inside, chaos thrashed. The staff scrambled. Silt clattered into position with his net cannon. Another instructor loaded a tranquilizer module. Garena again? Someone asked. No, Krell said, checking the data stream. New one, cub called Rec. Footage showed the small male spinning in circles, foaming at the mouth not from illness but pure, unfiltered fury. 3 overturned tables, 1 melted play projector, and a shattered viewing panel lay in his wake. No one go in, Krell ordered. He's in a full frenzy. He'll shred air. Daniel walked into the corridor, slippers quiet on the floor. He glanced at the chaos, then at the instructors bracing for combat. Anyone hurt? Not yet, said Krell, but they will be. Daniel set down his thermos. Give me 60 seconds. That is suicidal. Daniel didn't reply. He pressed the override on the classroom door. It hissed open. The screech that emerged was feral. Rec flung a chair through the air. It embedded itself 3 inches into the far wall. Bits of foam fluttered down like confetti. Daniel stepped inside. The door shut behind him. For the first 15 seconds, the staff stared at the sealed door, frozen in horrified anticipation. At second 20, Silt activated the breach countdown. At second 42, Krell raised her weapon. At second 59, the door opened again. Daniel walked out, unbloodied, holding Rec like a toddler. The cub was draped over his arm, growling softly, nose pressed into Daniel's chest. Daniel looked exhausted. Sweat clung to his neck. He had 1 new bite mark on his upper arm, oozing faintly, but his other hand cradled the cub's head gently. Get me some antiseptic and gauze, he said quietly. The medical bots moved fast. Krell followed him into the infirmary. What did you do? Daniel hissed as the bot cleaned the wound. Just waited, sat down, told him a story I used to like when I got too mad to think. Was that the only injury? Daniel pulled back the pajama sleeve, revealing 4 deep scratches, still weeping. Not the worst I've had, he muttered. How long will that take to heal? Scratches? 2 weeks, maybe 3. This bite's deeper though, might need a tetanus shot. You knew he could kill you. Yeah. Why did you go in there? Daniel looked at her. Because he was scared. The room went quiet. By the end of the week, Daniel's presence had become routine. The cubs didn't charge when the classroom door opened. They didn't attack new toys. One, even under supervision, shared a paintbrush. Daniel carried new scars. One wrapped around his wrist like a red bracelet. Another trailed down the side of his calf, just above the slipper line. He limped a bit on Fridays. But the cubs followed him like ducklings. He still wore pajamas. The armor-clad instructors began watching more than intervening. A few even removed their helmets, just inside the observation chamber, curious. Why do they listen to him? Silt asked one afternoon, sipping warm broth. Because he listens to them, Krell said, almost surprised to hear herself say it. Daniel walked by with a cub on each hip. Snack time, he called. They're requesting blue fruit again. You might want to lock the storage room. They watched him go. Behind him, trailed, the storm soothed, for now. And all he carried was a book, a thermos, and the patient, worn weight of someone who had seen true chaos and survived it in slippers. Classroom Gamma's war alarms hadn't sounded in 4 full rotation cycles. That was unheard of. Instructor Krell reviewed the incident logs with increasing disbelief. No maulings, no destruction of safety equipment. The emergency adhesive foam had expired, unused because the cubs hadn't shredded a single containment wall. Silt leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the chart. It's unnatural, he said. Krell said nothing. She watched the surveillance feed as Daniel helped a cub practice counting toy moons. He wore a new pajama set navy blue, dotted with tiny orange rockets, and his left ankle was wrapped with soft medical tape. His limp had improved, but his movement was still stiff. At the story corner, Garina was curled around his foot, humming low in her throat. Two other cubs snoozed behind him in a heap of fur and tail. Silt shook his head. They're calm, too calm. That one used to foam at the mouth if someone looked at his snack square. He offered to help with the fire drill today, Krell said. You can't run in slippers. No, but he says he can carry 2 cubs at a time and knows 5 evacuation methods for confined buildings. Silt fell silent. The fire drill began with a test burst of klaxons and flashing ceiling strobes. Cub hearing was especially sensitive, so the alarms had been modified to lower pitch and reduced frequency. Still, on any normal day, it was enough to send them into a frenzy. Not this time. Daniel clapped twice, sharp but gentle. All right, team, he said. Remember the rules. Ears down, tails up, hands on the back of the cub in front of you. They formed a line. A few aliens in full riot armor stood outside the door, stunned. Daniel jogged alongside the cubs as they marched. Garina veered left, curious about a flashing exit sign, but Daniel gently redirected her with a hand on her shoulder. Rek was last in line, sulking a little, but he followed with only minimal growling. When they reached the outside muster area, Daniel knelt. Proud of you, he said. That was your best time yet. The cubs beamed literally. Threxel pupils glowed faint blue when experiencing pride. The staff had previously considered this a threat display. Daniel just called it Victory Sparkle. Krell approached him as he massaged his ankle. Are you all right? Yeah. Still sore, but healing. Doctor said, I can do light walking. You didn't use the emergency lift. Didn't need to. They kept pace. You're not even winded. Daniel wiped his forehead. Human kids will do anything to not walk, so I've been lugging squirming creatures around for years. Builds core strength. Krell stared. That evening, the staff met in the debrief chamber. There was a tension in the room, less about danger, more about identity. I can't believe I'm saying this, said one instructor slowly, but we should observe his methods. Closely, I think the cubs are evolving faster. He uses no command tones, said another. No vocal suppression, no posture dominance. He reads to them, Silt muttered, baffled. And they sit still. Krell remained silent, arms folded. When the room emptied, she sat alone with the internal footage from earlier that day. The camera had caught a quiet moment during free play. Daniel sat on a pillow, a crayon wedged behind one ear. A cub approached from behind, claws extended, as if intending mischief. Daniel turned just in time, but instead of flinching, he opened his arms. The cub paused, then ran into the hug. Krell leaned back in her seat, troubled. She'd always seen the cubs as future soldiers, hard, fast, and ruthless, born of flame and raised in chaos. But Daniel saw something different. He saw children. 2 days later, during creative construction hour, a cub attempted to eat a glue dispenser. Daniel didn't yell. He walked over, gently took the dispenser, and replaced it with a chunk of blue fruit and a plastic chew ring. Non-toxic doesn't mean tasty, he said. Try this instead. You can gnaw it into shapes. The cub obeyed. Behind the observation window, Instructor Felra turned off her suit's voice filter. He doesn't command, he just redirects. Later that day, Daniel noticed Felra stepping into the classroom. Not fully armored, just the vest. No gauntlets. Her face was visible for the first time. You all right in here? She asked hesitantly. Daniel nodded. You're welcome to stay. She did. She read a book aloud, haltingly, awkwardly, but the cubs listened. No one got bitten. No one had to be restrained. When the bell rang, Felra returned to the observation hall, stunned and speechless. Krell met her with a cup of broth. Well? Felra took it, hands trembling. I think I understand now. It's not armor that keeps us safe. It's how we show them who we are. Daniel sat in the infirmary again that night, ankle elevated, sipping his now lukewarm cocoa. The bruising had deepened, and the top of his foot had turned a dull purple. The medical bots fussed over it. Moderate soft tissue trauma, one chirped. Recommend limited movement for another 6 Earth days. Krell stepped in, observing silently. You're not healing quickly, she said. No, humans aren't fast healers, but we're stubborn. He sipped again. We know pain doesn't always mean danger, it's just the cost of learning something new. You shouldn't have to pay that cost so often. Daniel smiled tiredly. Kindergartners are like storms. They test every structure to see what holds. You show them calm, they learn calm. Krell glanced at the stack of paper drawings beside him, crude renderings of stars, claws, and somewhat distressingly accurate depictions of Daniel's slippers. They admire you, she said. I don't want admiration, I want them to feel safe. Krell watched him a moment longer. Then, slowly, she removed one gauntlet. Underneath was a bandaged forearm, a scar from a long-ago bite. She pulled something from her pack and handed it to him. A pair of soft fabric slippers stitched with small planetary symbols. Daniel blinked. Are these for me? They're for the next shift, Krell said. I'd like to try this pajama method. Daniel beamed. Just remember, hot drink, slow tone, and patience. I'm not human. No, Daniel said, but kindness translates just fine. Outside the infirmary window, the cubs napped under stars projected on the ceiling. Somehow, the classroom no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like home. By the 4th week, the transformation of Classroom Gamma was impossible to ignore. Gone were the shredded insulation panels and repair drones that had once hovered on standby like battlefield medics. The emergency net launchers lining the walls hadn't been deployed in 13 full rotations. Even the infamous supply cabinet, once triple-locked and routinely looted by cubs during playful uprisings, now sat peacefully unguarded, containing only crayons and Daniel's stash of marshmallows. And every morning, without fail, the cubs greeted him the same way. Not with a roar, not with a clawed ambush, but with a stampede of small bodies crashing into his legs, pressing into his sides, pawing at his slippers, and shoving picture books into his arms. His new pajamas, green today, with little constellations stitched along the cuffs, were already dotted with fingerprint smudges and crayon streaks. Garina climbed onto his lap without asking. Same story, she demanded, flaring her ears. Daniel adjusted her gently, so her tail wouldn't block the book. Again? That's the 4th time this week. 5th, mumbled Rek, already curling up at his left side. All right, Daniel said, opening the book with a yawn. One more time. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't use a translator. Just warmth, patience, and a rhythm of words that sounded more like home than instruction. Behind the observation glass, Instructor Silt watched without his chest plate for the first time. He leaned against the wall, clutching a warm drink and mumbling a running commentary to himself. Garina hasn't tried to gut anyone in 2 weeks. Rex stopped biting power cables, and Fen hugged him, actually initiated contact. Next to him, Instructor Felra nodded slowly. She wore soft boots now, instead of plated greaves. The classroom felt different in a way that was difficult to describe, like someone had turned the gravity down. But not everyone was convinced. High Director Sorlin arrived that afternoon. Word had reached administration, Classroom Gamma, previously the most dangerous early education site on Threxel Prime, had recorded 0 violent incidents for a full month. That had never happened before. Sorlin wore ceremonial battle armor, polished obsidian plating with gold detailing that shimmered under the station's artificial lights. He stepped into the observation room like a warlord inspecting a fallen enemy camp. Where is the human? He asked. Silt gestured toward the classroom window. Daniel was singing softly. The cubs swayed in place, half asleep, drooling quietly onto each other. One had tucked herself under his pajama top, using his abdomen as a pillow. Sorlin blinked. Is that allowed? It happens, Krell said evenly. She was beside him, unarmored, holding a tiny pair of slippers under one arm. Sorlin crossed his arms. And you're all unprotected? Felra gestured to her vest, technically padded. And this is the human's influence? Sorlin's voice held disbelief, even disdain. Your strategy is cuddling? He calls it co-regulation, Silt offered. Daniel chose that moment to glance up. He waved. The cubs didn't stir. Bring him here, Sorlin said. Now. Daniel arrived in the staff room carrying his ever-present thermos and a child's drawing stuck to his shoulder with paste. His limp was nearly gone, though he still favored one side when he sat. "Afternoon," he said. "What can I do for you?" Sorlin narrowed his eyes. "You have removed chaos from one of our most critical development environments. That is not necessarily a compliment." Daniel blinked. "You wanted the chaos?" "Chaos sharpens instinct," Sorlin said. "Threxel children must be prepared to defend themselves before they molt. Every cub in your classroom will one day enter military service." Daniel took a sip. "You think I'm making them soft?" Sorlin tilted his head. "I think," he said carefully, "that your presence has interfered with their natural aggression cycle." Daniel set his thermos down. He pulled back his sleeve and pointed to the healing bite mark. Then another scar. And the limp. "They didn't get less aggressive," he said. "They got safe enough to stop showing it every second." Sorlin was silent. "You don't remove survival instinct by offering comfort," Daniel continued. "You give them a baseline, a calm starting point. So when the real chaos comes, they know how to return to calm." Krell stepped forward quietly. "They've improved cognitively. Their linguistic complexity has doubled. They cooperate. They resolve fights without escalation." "They apologize," Silt added, amazed. Sorlin frowned. "What do you claim is responsible for this?" Daniel thought for a moment. Then he pulled a small object from his pocket. A ragged bedtime storybook, creased, stained, and held together with tape. "Words," he said simply, "and showing them that being cared for isn't a weakness." Sorlin looked down at the book, then back up at Daniel. "And if the chaos returns?" he asked. "If the cubs turn again?" Daniel smiled. "Then, we start over. We sit down, we breathe, we read, and we remind them that being a storm doesn't mean they can't also be someone's shelter." Sorlin said nothing. Then, after a long silence, he turned and left. Nap time, 3 days later. Daniel sat beneath the reading tree, a synthetic structure shaped like the old Terran banyans, wide-limbed and gently lit. Around him, the cubs had piled up like leaves, snoring softly, paws twitching in dreams. He had one arm bandaged again, fresh claw slice, this time from a disagreement over block towers. But the cub had helped him clean the wound. Had cried while apologizing. Daniel never raised his voice. He just said, "I know you didn't mean to. Let's work on better ways next time." He looked around the room now and saw not chaos but potential. Fur and claws and teeth, yes. But also giggles, curiosity, and trust. Instructor Krell approached silently and sat beside him, handing over a new mug of cocoa. She had replaced her chest plate with a padded vest. On her feet were slippers stitched with moons. She spoke softly. "The new recruits start tomorrow. We're assigning them here." Daniel chuckled. "Throwing them in the deep end, huh? We're giving them a chance to learn calm before they learn force." He looked over at her. "You've changed your stance. You've changed your stance. You've—" "No," she said. "You changed mine." Daniel leaned back against the tree. Outside the observation window, Sorlin passed by unarmored, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the room with an unreadable expression. He paused just long enough to nod once, and then kept walking. As lights dimmed across the station and the artificial evening set in, Daniel tucked the book beneath his arm, careful not to disturb the cubs. One stirred. "Wreck." His voice was thick with sleep. "Tomorrow? More story?" Daniel smiled. "Always." The cub curled closer. And across the room, battlesuits hung unused on the walls, gleaming relics of a time when the only way to survive was to dominate. But now, a new uniform had taken root. Soft cotton, warm cocoa, gentle presence. And at its center, a man in pajamas, sitting among small monsters, reading them gently into dreams.